So good afternoon, everybody. I am sitting here with my Imaginate mug in my hand filled with green tea, ready to go through this. So please grab a beverage of choice and we'll take a look at what's new within Vault 2022. And it's kind of interesting. I was just telling Cassie, I've got next month will be my 20th year with Imaginate. So I've been doing these for a long time. We used to, of course, do them live and we do multiple cities. Now we do so many of these webcasts just like this. But this is one when I was getting ready for, I always think of the what's new within any given product in a couple of different ways. One is, wow, that's amazing. I'm so glad they did that. And others kind of are, well, it's about time. And this covers a few of those. I really like this release and some of the features that we have. Vault is a mature product. It seems like, what else can they make it do? But there's a lot of these things are smoothing out a lot of the things that we typically do with Vault and enhancing what we typically do with Vault. So Vault is the idea of collaboration. This is something that is just it's a thread that runs through everything Autodesk talks about. It's what we at Imaginate talk about, the idea of maintaining all of those different types of things. So with this release, there's this idea of they talk about having a modern, connected, and insightful user experience. That's kind of what Autodesk is calling it out within there. I'm going to take it down to a little bit of certain things and kind of how it affects different people. And one of them is the idea of individual authors, people creating the information that's going into this. And this has, if you think of Inventor users, AutoCAD users, this is really an area we see some improvements in with how we interact with Vault and how we access it and the different things that we come into there. So authors, some great tools coming up, and I'll pull those up in a minute and kind of walk through those. The other side of that is the administrators. So with the administrators we want to make sure this whole experience runs smoothly, right? And being able to roll this out and how we either connect multiple work groups or how we manage our users and put that information in. And there's some things in here for that. Now, part of this, and this to me is one of the big parts of this that we've seen in the last several years that continues to flow through Vault and the things that we do with Vault, is the idea of participants. So these are people who are not creating, but they're consuming the information. And we've seen this over the last few years, some things that have come into play with the Vault mobile app that's been in place, and specifically now the web client. The web client has been completely redone. I love it. It's so much more of it's a much more modern tool, but just more than that, it's a much more useful tool. So these kind of key areas, authors, administrators, participants, is kind of what I'm going to walk through and look a little bit of each piece of this. So with authors, it's the idea of focusing specifically on the work. And I'll talk about that a little bit, like what kind of that looks like. The biggest key for me is this integrated data experience. So for years, if you've taken a Vault class with me, if I've implemented Vault at your location, if I have done a webcast about Vault, you may have heard me at some point say, the CAD is where I do my engineering work, Vault is where I go to do where I'm going to go to do administrative work. So a lot of times I would run with both of those tools open at the same time and be switching back and forth. So within a day's work, I'd check files in and out, but then if I release them, if I need to make some changes, review some information, whatever it would be, all of that would occur within the Vault tool. And you can still totally do that. It works very much the same way. None of that has changed in doing that part. But what has happened is now we've got kind of contextual information already within the CAD tool. So I'll point this out in a moment. We've got this new details panel that we can work with, where we're going to be able to see change order information. We're going to be able to assign items. If you're using an item-based workflow, you're going to be able to do that from the CAD environment. It's all right within the CAD environment, accessing Vault directly, updating information within Vault, pushing that over there. So to me, this is huge because this is something we kind of had two separate areas we were always working in, and they're being pulled together in a much more connected way. The workflow is much much more in context and kind of in front of you where you're at the time. Going along with that idea is, we can access that contextual information. They've also updated a few things. I probably won't go into this too deep, but if you're using the revision table, there is now a new latest released date, and there's something called an approver property that's going to be in there. And both of these are very useful it was sometimes difficult to get the information we wanted into that revision table. Now we've got some specific things that are going to allow us to do that. And I just realized I think my screen was paused that whole time, so I apologize as I've been going through and talking through each of those pieces. But what we're going to do is I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to just pull my screen up, and I'm going to go grab my Inventor here real quick. So within my Inventor, I've got my Inventor 2022. I've got it up and ready to go, and it's all set and part and parcel of this. I'll work just within this component that I have right here, and we've got our typical Vault information that we've seen in the past. And this is just how Vault has worked before and different pieces we've seen with that. I'm actually going to open up another assembly here real quick. And what I want to do is I've got this information based in my Vault. I'll go grab it from my Vault here. So I'm going to log into my Vault. And again, at this point, it all looks very, very similar. It's different tools that we've seen before and different items that we've worked on before. But I'm going to go ahead and open this up and just say check it out and all of those different types of things. I'm going to move this over here. And yep, that's fine. Properties out of date. So typical Vault functionality, typical Vault information that I'm going to work with. What I want to do though now is once I've got this up, I'm going to bring up this new panel that I have in Vault. And again, I'm changing things the way I do things just a little bit here. For years and years, what I would always say is, gosh, I don't even mess with this Vault toolbar. I do everything right off of my, Vault tab, and this is where I check things in and out. I don't even go over here. Well, part of the way this has changed for me is this new option called Show Details. Now, this is a big, big tab that shows up as part of this, so you probably want to turn it off and turn it on as necessary. It is an in-context toolbar. I can float it if I want to. I can dock it. Typically, I've kind of been working with it just kind of docked over here, because what I have should look familiar. It's that same history, it's the uses, where used, all of that information that I go to Vault to see is now built right in here, including change order information, which currently I don't have any against this one, and any bill of material information if I'm using items. So this showing up now directly within my Inventor client. It's just part and parcel of it, built right into it. I can go see the different pieces. I can go to a component. I can go to that folder. I can go grab, this piece that I want to get. All of those things that I would expect. That takes me right to that folder in Vault. I can now see that piece and open it up from there. So it's just like those same tabs over here in Vault, except I now have them visible within Inventor. So I don't have to leave Inventor to go work with any of that. And for years, we've been able to do the check-in, check-out, properties, change states, revisions, those different types of things. Now we're enhancing it where we've got this tab where we can go locate this information. This is also pretty smart. As I go click on the different items, you notice that it changes automatically for me over here. So I can kind of query through and see all of those different pieces and then understand history used, where used, etc., based off of just the items that I'm selecting within my window. If I go the other way, I can select subcomponents and go down the line here. So I've got my overall component that I have. I'll take the master here. And then I can see the pieces that are in it. And then I can filter down to those if I want to. And again, I can go to those right within the, I can open them up from here. I can go right to Vault. Love it. I love the fact that that's built directly into it and we can access it from there now. Again, I'm kind of moving it around and I'm just going to shut it down when I don't need it. But the idea that I can pop that up, view the information, see that as part of it becomes really, really powerful for working with those different tool sets that I'd have. So It was a great addition. Again, it's not something that completely changes how we're working with it, but it definitely enhances what we're doing and kind of smooths out some of those different things. So another thing that has changed and kind of updated within here is working in conjunction with some of the Inventor tools. So Inventor now has these model states that are part of this. And with model states, I have access to these within Vault, and I can open up a specific model state. Checking in controls all of them. And again, if you're using items, I can assign an item for each model state. And model states are a whole new story. It's a whole big thing within Inventor. You can see some options we have up top where it's order of operations. You know, first this occurs, then this occurs, then that occurs as you go across the top graphic. Another example of a model state would be here's the full conveyor, and here is a simplified version of that conveyor or that unit, you know, taken down, you know, we've got a simplified and we've got a more complex version. So that is all handled by Vault. We can check them in and check them out. We can assign items for each model state. So if I had 3 variations of a component, I could have an item for each variation. And that really allows us to open up the idea of bill of material variants so that we could have different variants within our bill of material to be able to access that with different part numbers, different metadata, and have that in there. Again, the point here is with Vault is that we can access those model states. That is a big, big topic within Inventor, and it's one of the brand new features we have within Inventor to be able to access that. So I don't want to get too deep into model states right now, but we do have access to them. We can manage them. And kind of working along that idea of collaboration and continuing with that is the idea of working with Revit. Revit files are going to be referenced within Inventor assemblies. So we can track building changes from our customers. If someone is sending me a Revit file, that can now be managed in Vault as well. So we can check in and archive them. In Inventor, Revit files can be used by selecting them. You know, we can just open it from the Vault directly. And so if we get sent a new one, we can update and manage it in there. This is something that's been in the works for a while, the idea of Revit and Vault and how these pieces come together. This has kind of been expanded here so that we can now archive them and track them in Vault as well. This is something that, again, I kind of could do before, but now it's really been enhanced as a big part of that as we come to this. Another key thing, and this has been around in some point releases, but some of these different ideas, now they're expanding it even further, and it's really something that catches all of us, right? We've got the same part, it's been created multiple times, it's really the same thing, and it's just one more of those and we drew it again. Or we gave it a different part number, even though it was incredibly similar, whatever it would be. So the idea of duplicate reduction has been enhanced within 2022. What we've had in the past was the ability to search for duplicate file names. Now we can go through and understand more of this information for finding duplicates. We can do things such as excluding mirrored parts. And this was a thing that was difficult before. It would say, hey, these 2 parts are the same. Well, yeah, they're the same because they're a mirror. So almost any vault would have a list of duplicate parts within there. We could also do things such give me an exact match. So an exact match we can control things such as, say, material. I want to make sure it's exactly the same material. It's exactly built in exactly the same way. It's not just the same general BREP that I have, but it's exactly the same information. And then we can we can then filter it with metadata. So we can find that information but then we can also control it with the metadata. So in this case, we can say, hey, it has to be in this certain folder, it has to be released, it has to be this. And that way we can exclude things in Content Center, because a lot of times Content Center says, oh, you've got all these duplicates. Well, sort of. I mean, it's another washer, it's a different finish, it's a different whatever. Now we can say, nope, only look in designs, only find this information, and only find this. So the idea of working with duplicate reduction is enhanced. Again, it's been around for a little bit. We had it in some older tools, but now we can expand it out and see it some other places as well. So on the user side, we talked, there's the idea of that new panel that's in there, so I can work within Vault even though I'm inside of Inventor. I've got the control of that. I've got the idea of being able to have those duplicates found, and I can work with that extended information, whether it's Revit or whether it's the model states. I can begin to work with all of that. So that's on the user side. The administrator side, and this is something that just makes me smile when I think about it, because this is always, I end up working in this area and dealing with this. So what we've seen is the idea of, how do we give people access to this? How does this team come together? This is something that we really, Autodesk has expanded quite a bit in a couple of different ways. One, first of all, Active Directory is huge. So something like 70% of Vault Professional clients use Active Directory as how they manage their groups and how they manage their users. Combined with that, there's also Autodesk IDs. So there's an Active Directory. I log in as cfunc to my RAND domain, but I've also got an Autodesk ID of caleb.func. So when I go to log in, how do I put this information together? It was two completely separate areas. Now all of this can map together. So we can have this information come together in a single location. And when I create users, I can now assign this different information. And this stood out to me enough that I just want to go ahead and pull this up and grab my, I'm going to grab my Vault here. And if I take a look, I'm going to go to my administration under my global. So here's my users. And I'm going to go grab Frank S here. And you'll notice I've got a display name, first and last name. And then if I come in here, I've got accounts. So I can tie this to, I can say authenticate. Do I want to use a Vault account? Or maybe I don't. I don't have to have two separate users now where I've got a Vault account and a password. I definitely can, but I could just say, no, for this one, we're only using Windows authentication. Or maybe we're using the Autodesk ID. Or maybe they can get in using any one of those. So typically what would happen, and I saw this a lot with people that move from Vault Basic to Vault Pro, is they would have everyone had been entered once as a Vault user, then we moved to Vault Pro, and now all of a sudden we're dealing with everyone we've got a whole second set of users because we imported the Active Directory accounts. Now we can determine no matter where that user started, how we're going to authenticate them, and if we want to tie them to an Autodesk ID. So again, we're moving away from the idea of, these being separate components. It's all tied together and we can control those different authentications within there. So whatever the administrator chooses as the best way, for their organization, there's different ways that we can do that, set that up. These profile attributes, these can be mapped to Active Directory properties. So that, email aliases, whatever it's going to be, we can bring all of that in. And we can include this information. So my display name can be just about anything. And then I can have a separate login. Because one of the difficulties we had before was if you used sometimes Active Directory, it was almost impossible to tell, it was a series of numbers and letters was your Active Directory account. I wanted to show Caleb did it. Caleb logged in, Caleb F was working on it. That's what the display name is all about. So no matter what accounts we have logged to it, we can have display names show up differently. So I think that's a great addition to managing those users and to being able to set them up so that we've got those effectively put in the right place and we can control that. So since we have usernames and since we have all of that additional data and information that's part of it, Another key piece of this is they've enhanced the audit logs. So within the console, we always had console logs, server logs. Now we're going to see audit logs that are added to this. And this is something that I know has been requested for quite some time. This is something I've heard a lot of different clients ask for, is like, how do I know who got into the vault? How do I know who got that information? You know, how do we know who accessed this? And this is how. Now we've got an audit log with 2022. It's going to record the username, date and time, which vault they logged into, what authentication type was used, and what happened. So we might see something like, okay, you know, Mike logged into the thin client onto, you know, the sandbox vault using his Autodesk ID on 5/12 at 2:30 in the afternoon, and downloaded 25 files and deleted 2 of them. And that history is going to be stored in there. So we can go back and we can make sure that we have what we need for record keeping. And again, this is one of those, I always say, hey, there's those different things that we look at and we say, wow, what a great new enhancement, changes everything. And like, oh man, about time. This one feels like an about time. I think the ability to, you know, see this history and not just see who logged in, but now what happened, right? These files were edited, changed, updated, all of those different sorts of things. That really becomes key. I believe I've got my Vault, tool up here. So you can take a look at our management. I've got file store logs now that are part of this. And here's everything that's happening with the file store logs. These have been around, but now I also have audit logs. So at this point, I haven't done it. I've got a brand new vault that I'm working with. I haven't done a whole lot, but I do have this history of these logs that are part of this, and I can now view this information and what's going on. So I'll grab my particular vault. Yep, and I don't have anything set up with my logs yet. But we can track that. We can have that information that's in there and part of it, and we can go access it. Now, the other key thing on the idea of the admin side is how things have changed a little bit in terms of replication. So Vault Professional, it's been scalable for multi-site teams for a very long time. You know, if we have different departments, divisions, geographies, we've had replication technology. And there were 2 types of replication: file store replication, database replication. And what has changed a little bit is how the replication works on the database level. So what happens is this has been simplified. In previous releases, users could connect it to a subscriber or a publisher to do read-write operations. So if there was this idea of read-write and look through that, and then afterwards the data would be merged. So there was this idea of ownership. And if you have never heard of it, great. If you ever ran into it, I'm sure you're aware of it, because you're like, what? I can't do anything to this file because this other group owns it. So what happens is the idea of ownership became kind of difficult, because now ownership had to be passed back and forth between different servers. And if I'm losing you on that, don't worry about it. It was not fun, is what it came down to. It was difficult to manage this ownership model. Well, what has happened now is that's been changed a little bit. Autodesk rethought it, and they changed the ownership model to mainly that we have the only read-write location is the publisher. That's where we can push information to. The database that we have is going to be a read database. So what does this mean? Well, not a whole lot probably, because typically 70 to 90% of transactions were read-only anyway. So what happens is now if we need, it happens automatically. If something needs to be written to, it gets pushed back to the main database. If it's a read, it gets pulled from the replicated database. If you want to dig into this more, if this is something you want to start using, it's worth a discussion. And you know, we can kind of get a hold of me, get a hold of anyone else, and imagine it. We can kind of talk through what needs to happen with this. You would have to change your structure a little bit, but this is an enhancement to really speed up that information. The transactions happen now almost simultaneously, which is really nice, and it's smooths out and makes it much more stable. And that's a key thing with me. This was always the replication between those. Once we got it set up and it was running, usually it was great, but there could be difficulties in establishing it and how we want to get that going. File replication hasn't changed. This is all about the database side of the replication portion. So it's a really great tool for that. Last thing here on the idea of working with, talking about the administrator side of things, is there's a new installer experience. So one thing I will say is, and this is really nice, is all Vault add-ins are pre-installed. So I'll just explain what that is a little bit. What happened in the past is you had to install CAD first, then Vault, because the Vault was looking for the CAD that was there to make sure to put the right add-ins in. So if you didn't go in that order, it basically would say, hey, I installed Vault. There was no Inventor on this machine. There was no AutoCAD on this machine. No worries, just install Vault. And then you would install Inventor and go, oh my gosh, I can't see my Vault. And you would have to rerun the installer is basically what would happen. Now the order doesn't matter. They've simplified that so that it doesn't matter. It just goes in as part of that. It understands that those information is there and it pulls that in. A couple other things that are part of this. This one I'm cautious about. Vault Data Standard, you can just check a box so that it installs as part of it. I would not recommend just installing Vault Data Standard unless you specifically are going to do some, go through and do some development with it. This used to be kind of a hidden, not really hidden, but it was not immediately obvious where the data standard installers were, and there were multiple things to install. Now it is just part of a single checkbox. Again, though, data standard is kind of a big topic. There's a lot going on there, so unless you're specifically doing development, I probably wouldn't put that in. Vault Office is now a completely separate installer from Workgroup and Professional. It was kind of, again, it was an option you could go get to and you could go access it. And basically they've made this just a little bit simpler. And one thing I heard from Irvin Hayes recently was that across the board, all the installers that Autodesk is doing have been enhanced so that the installs go quicker. I love it. I hope they do. To me, I haven't done enough of them to really know how much of a difference it makes, but it was definitely something that was alluded to, and it's definitely something Autodesk is aware of. These installs take a while. Vault's not terrible, actually. The client's not bad, but he was saying it's across the board. They all do. So hopefully we'll begin to see that a little bit. Okay, so we've got things for the authors. We've got things for the administrators. Let's talk about the participants. And this is one that really, really stands out to me. So participants are, I'm not creating the data, I just need to view the data. And there's tools for this that have been around for a while. One of them being the Vault web client, and that's gone through a few iterations. But anytime we look at this, we've got these different challenges as we're pulling out this information. We want to participate in this digital thread. So if we're on the shop floor, we might not have we don't want paper, but we might not have access to a terminal, and searching for drawings, we've got a partner, we just want to find it. If you're at a customer site, well, now we've got something different. We looking for documentation, trying to deal with engineering change requests. If you're out in the field, maybe you want to be able just to view something, you want to just find the right documentation, all of these different areas that come into this. Well, one thing they've done is they've really enhanced the Vault Thin client that's part of this. And I'm going to pull this up because this is a big deal. I absolutely love the way that this works. So they've changed this so it works pretty well. It shouldn't say pretty well, it works very well on the desktop or tablets. This is all for this Vault browser. We can have multiple tab browsers. We can view 2D and 3D designs within here really easily, and that's one part I want to show off in a minute. we can access change order information. So before, the thin client was limited to just going in and search view print. We could see some files, maybe we could see their history. Now we can go in and access change order information as well as just the model information. So this is also really key and really important to how this works within here. So I'm going to pull this up, and I'm just going to go over here to my, I'm just in Chrome that I'm going to access. And notice that built into this looks a little different already, because I can come in and this is my server, this is my vault, and both of those are built into my URL. This was something that used to drive me nuts, where you could set it up this way, but by default, it wasn't that way. You had to kind of build a URL that had that. But I'm going to log in as administrator, and I'm going to sign into my vault. I could use my Windows account, you know, all those things that we would typically think of, but I'll go ahead and sign in. And first of all, the responsiveness is great. It immediately returns to me. I can see the information. It comes back right away. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to look at designs, and you can just see as I'm navigating this how quickly we're walking through and navigating it. Again, this is all real time. I'm just clicking on it on my computer. I'll go ahead and select this drawing, and I have all of the properties of that drawing, any user-defined properties, any system-defined properties. I've got the history of that drawing. I've got uses and where used, just like I would within Vault, all the information coming through for that. And by the way, I can go access this information. I can go view a specific file. I could follow the trail down and go see the file that way. And you'll notice this is one thing I think is really cool, this idea of multi-tab. If I come along, I'm going to say open that in a new tab. It takes me to that part in a new tab. That's how I would think that this would work, right? I want to follow that through, and it just naturally want to follow that through and see that information that way. So I've got my properties, my history, where used, uses, any item information that's associated to that, and I haven't had any items for that yet, any change orders that I have against it. And then this is the one that is so interesting. I'm going to click here on view, and it's using the Forge viewer to pull this up in the background. So now I've got this information here, and I can view it within my Forge viewer. Again, this is something where I don't have, this is going to work equally well on anything that can access this URL. I don't have to have anything pre-installed. I can simply go access it. I'm going to go back here. We'll take a look at this again. We'll take a look at uses, and I'm going to go look at this assembly. So I'm going to go grab it. Again, I opened it in another tab, and it just jumps up in that tab. And I'm going to view this. This is the actual 3D model. You can see the information associated to it. And I'm going to go view that. Why can't I view my visualization? I should be able to. Send it over to Forge here. So when I go to view this information, again, it uses this idea of the Forge viewer, and it pulls it up within Forge, grabs the information that's part of that, and I can now see all of that within there. This, as a 3D viewer, is really very powerful. You know, I've got measuring tools that are part of it, angle, you know, I can begin to go in and take a look at that. I can, I'm going to say done with that part. I can do sections. I can even come along and begin to explode the model and review it within here. Objects can be turned off. I can set them as pivot points. A whole variety of different tools that I have available to me within this viewer. So very, very powerful viewer built directly into the Vault web client. Now, what I'm looking for right now, everything I'm looking for is files. I could also go view my items. I could also view any change orders that I have as part of that. So all of that is just part and parcel of how this is going to work now within the web client. To get to that, it just is part of the 2022 installer. So when that gets sent out, we have that. I'm going to go ahead and create a change order. I'm going to add that particular component to the change order. Let's update per red lines. I'm just going to save this change order just so I have one that's existing. And now I should be able to go see that over here in my change orders list. Okay, I can't participate in the change order through this. I still need Vault Office to participate, but I can go see the files, any change orders, attachments, records, and know that they're there. This was something that was missing before. It was difficult to understand, if a particular file, did it have any change orders under it and where they were. I would just see the file that's there. We wouldn't see anything till it changed. So huge change, the ability to view all this information directly within the web client, to have that thin client, and to have 2D, 3D design, separate browser tabs, all of that, absolutely massive. So that's what that's all about, is being able to access that. Now there is the thin client. However, instead of having a, going to a particular site for this, there is a Vault mobile app that's part of this as well. And the Vault mobile app, you can go ahead, you have to have Vault Professional or Vault Office is what it works with. It won't work just with Vault Workgroup or Vault Basic. But this Vault mobile app, it was introduced in February of this year. I was playing with a beta version of it a little bit before that. It's on the Apple App Store. It's on the Google Play Store. Basically, they're looking at iOS 12, Android 8 or later, and it works with 20, 21, or 22 servers. So you have to have, there is an option that has to be turned on for the administrator to turn it on. Not everybody automatically has access to it. But using this, you can get in, look through the folders, view the files. You can check non-CAD files in and out. So this is different than what we have a moment ago with just the web client. Now we can check these in and out. Assuming you have a license, you can review, approve, and sign documents. So we're talking about the idea of participating now in the change orders and moving through that. There, you can run all the different searches through there. You can you can scan a QR code, which takes you to a particular item. All of those different things happen through the app. So we've got a couple of different ways of accessing this information for the extended team. One would be with the web viewer, where we go in and use the web information to go access that. And then we have the app, which now requires a license, but has extended information that's part of that. So a couple of different ways that that can be accessed and viewed, and you can participate as part of that. Okay, so a lot of talking. Gotta get a sip of my tea. So we have these key areas, and this is always what we see with Vault, kind of those key areas. The idea of, with authors, the ability to focus directly within the CAD tool. We don't have to leave the CAD tool to go to Vault to view where used. We don't have to go use Vault. Realistically, we could stay in the CAD tool most of the time. Those traditional things, I always said, yeah, you're going to go over to the other tool to view it. You're going to go to the other tool for administration. We don't have to nearly as much right now. Now it can be done so much through the CAD tool. Administrators, there's plenty of things here that's going to make your life a little bit easier, particularly with managing users and linking those Autodesk IDs to it so that we can pull that information in. And then finally, there's the idea of participants. And there's two big ways we can connect to this information now. One is the new web client that we have as part of it. And two is going to be the idea of the app that we have, the Autodesk, the Vault app. Suddenly escapes me, the mobile app that we have for Autodesk Vault, where we can connect to that. So there's a mobile app, or we can use the web browser. So a couple of different ways that we can access that. So those are the big ones that stood out to me. I like to always go through and show that. And as usual, I'm sure there's questions that we have on some of these different areas and some of these different things. So Cassie, I'd like to open it up for questions and answers if anyone has any questions.